Happy New Year, Tolkien Poppers, and I hope that you had a good holiday season and that you are starting to at least settle into a decent routine by getting back into work or doing your regular everyday stuff. You know, it kind of sucks to get out of your sweatpants and your sweatshirt to be a normal human being. But as you are climbing out of the hole that is the limbo between Christmas and New Year's, and now we're on here trying to make it, I've got this first episode of 2026 for you, and it is with none other than Kaitlyn Facista. And if you're like, who's Kaitlyn Facista, Nick? Maybe you've heard of a little thing called Tea with Tolkien. Yeah, Kaitlyn Facista is the creator of Tea with Tolkien, and she has a new book coming out in February 20th to be exact, which is the day after my birthday. So, be on the lookout for her book, which you should pre-order, which will be in the show notes. And also, maybe send me a little birthday love. Or, better yet, to celebrate my birthday, you should maybe get a book for yourself, maybe for me, and maybe even my own book. But anyway, not about me. It's about Kaitlyn and her new book, and we have just had a really cool conversation. And Tea with Tolkien's just been around the Tolkien online space for almost a decade now, and hopefully this conversation leads you into learning more about Tea with Tolkien, engaging more Tolkien fandom in general, and getting you connected to her book, which is a kind of cool spiritual take on Tolkien, which you get a lot of Kaitlyn's own spiritual engagement, her own takes on the Lord of the Rings and the Legendarium, and it's just a good book. So as someone who encounters a lot of just spiritual, theological Tolkien stuff, Kaitlyn's is very good, and I would highly recommend it. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this first Tolkien Pop podcast of 2026, and I will catch you later. Peace. What's up, Tolkien Poppers? This is Nick Polk here with another episode of the Tolkien Pop podcast, and I have a real treat for you because I get to talk to Kaitlyn Facista here. And if you don't know who that is, what's wrong with you? Where have you been? Have you been sleeping under a rock? Because she is the creator of Tea with Tolkien online community. She's also an official Amazon Rings of Power Tolkien expert, which is pretty insane. And she's also the author of the upcoming book, Into the Heart of Middle-earth. So, there's a little intro there. But Kaitlyn, give the people what they want. How are you?
I'm great. That was quite an introduction. I can't believe that's me.
It's I feel like the titles are starting to happen. I feel like when you're in the Tolkien community, if you get this place of status, you start getting like Tolkien-esque names, right? Like you don't just have one name, you've got 5 names.
Yes. Yeah, that's so real. Yeah, it feels great. It's very surreal.
So I guess too, before, just diving into the nitty gritty, like how have things been, since, you've been super busy in the past. I guess like what, almost 5 years, you've been pretty busy. So like, how's that
Yeah,
been?
it's been crazy. Yeah, since you brought up Rings of Power, I would say like ever since I got started, kind of being a part of their like community group, things have really been insane, because I was just doing my own thing, and I didn't really know very many other Tolkien creators until that point, kind of just, doing my little Tolkien reflections, leading my little book club. And then that opened up like the world to me, and I got to meet so many new people, and like made so many friends and had a lot of opportunities since then. So like that's been crazy. But it's just been such a wild ride, and I'm so busy. Like I don't even understand how I do as much as I do. It's crazy.
Man, that is so exciting. I just, because I remember when I first encountered you online. I mean, it was. How long have you had the community? First of all,
Since 2017.
okay,
So coming up on 10 years, which is crazy.
yeah, yeah. That's. I think that's probably around the time I started getting more into Tolkien. I started like doing more nerdy deep dives, probably around 2016. And so that was around the time I discovered people like the Prancing Pony podcast, you, and then I feel like from there it's just, the online Tolkien community has just like exploded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, getting to know all of these other people is like the absolute best part of it. And getting to, especially when we get to like talk like how we are now over podcast or when we get to go to like events and like meet up in real life. Like I was just at the Prancing Pony podcast moot a couple weeks ago. And it was just like just a bunch of nerds hanging out together. Like it does not get better than that. It's kind of the same for like the Tolkien Society's moots and stuff. It's just like that is the best ever.
It's so real. I it's one thing to meet online, right? Because it's super nice to have that access, but there's nothing like that face to face interaction where you actually get the community and there's sort of like this real tangible thing where you're like, these are my people and they totally get me. And that's
Yeah,
awesome.
exactly. Like you can be as nerdy as you want and they actually understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, you can bring up the names like Pangaloth and
Hmm.
the Morgoth's ring, and people are like, oh yeah, I totally know what you're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like it's pure joy.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're talking about Tolkien, but tell us more about your individual Tolkien journey, Kaitlyn. Like when and where did you first encounter him and his work, and obviously, like how has that continued to impact your life since then?
Sure. So, like a lot of people my age, my first experience was with the Jackson movies. I was like 10 or 11 or something. And the way I remember it is that someone had given my dad a DVD of The Fellowship of the Ring. And my dad's like a really big Star Wars guy. So he's not really into fantasy as much. He really likes sci-fi. And so he kind of like I mean, he was like appreciative of the gift, but he was like, nah, I don't know if I'll even watch this. And then I found it like on the table or something, and I immediately was like, what is this? I have to know. And then, of course, like, I don't even, it's all a blur after that. It just was like I fell headfirst into Middle Earth and never left. So in middle school, I was the kid like doodling. I tried to teach myself Elvish. Like, of course, I'm sure it was very flawed. I was like 12, but I was like doodling on my notebooks. I tried to write my name in Elvish on everything. And then that carried through into high school. We would always have, like, in high school, you have different projects. Like in art class, we might do calligraphy. And I was like, oh, I'll do a Lord of the Rings quote. In English, we had to learn about literary devices. And we had this really big project where we had to basically, we had like 50 literary devices and we had to find examples of them in literature. And I was like, I bet I can find all of these in The Lord of the Rings. And I did. Um, so that was fun. But I would find a way to like work The Lord of the Rings into any project at school. So then that kind of, just spiraled. I just was such a big nerd. And then graduated high school and I actually got married very young. And one of my best friends gave me a copy of the Silmarillion as a wedding gift. And I still have it. It's like a paperback copy, but they wrote a really nice note in it. And I still have that. It was like my first copy. And so I tried to read it several times and I failed just because I wasn't ready yet. I didn't have the focus or the determination. I'm like in college, I'm working, I'm busy. But eventually, finally got the Silmarillion down. And it's just, I don't know, Tolkien's just been like a thread through my life since I was like 10. And it's just something that has always been there for me. And I'm always learning. I've just never left Middle Earth, is how it feels.
Yeah. Oh man, I love everything about that. A lot of what you said resonates with me too, because I'm pretty sure we're probably around the same age. Just because also too the type of like emo, alternative music you
Yeah.
talk about feels like very 2002 tooth and nail record.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so I also came to the movies, one of the things I've seen with people our age and maybe people who are a little older, but I feel like they all have people who like Tolkien now all had dads who were into Star Wars. Like, like your
Yeah.
dad, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I feel like
Yeah.
I mean, Star Wars is just like the thing that dads like, isn't it?
Yeah. Like I feel like when someone's like, "Yeah, my dad put in the Star Wars VHS tapes," and you're like, "That's a good dad right there."
Yeah. Well, like I always say every Star Wars movie that I have been alive for, my dad took me to the midnight premiere of. So he was there at the very first Star Wars in 1977. He was there at his midnight premiere. He's been to all of them, and then he, like a good father, he took me to all of mine. So I went and saw The Phantom Menace when I don't know, I don't remember what year that came out. Um, so I don't know. It's like a special family tradition, I guess.
Man, that is awesome. So
Yeah.
obviously you had like a nerd, what's what
Yes.
I'm looking for? The person that you look up to. What's the word for that?
Like a role model?
There you go, the nerd
Yeah,
role model. Yeah. So you've had like a nerd role model for sure.
definitely.
Yeah, that's rad. Okay, so I feel very, very connected to your story in a lot of ways, and I also got married really young, and I really started doing a deep dive in college too, and tried to read the Silmarillion, read it, and I was like, what in the world did I just read?
Hmm.
Read it a second time, and I was like, kind of, I get it, maybe, and then of course, it's just a roller coaster, from
Yeah.
there, and just in a snowball. But yeah, I mean, obviously you've got Tea with Tolkien here, that it's kind of like your main community and sort of online presence that you have. But like from your, thinking from when you tried to read the Silmarillion to now, like how did that snowball into, participating in online fandom and even creating, your own space?
So I would say a lot of it kind of kicked off when I became a mom. And I was a stay-at-home mom. So I was just kind of like by myself at home with a baby. And babies aren't very good at making conversation. When they're newborns, you're just like by yourself, kind of. And so I really was striving to find some kind of community. And when my husband was in medical school, we had to move around a lot. And so I didn't really ever get an opportunity to like make a great friend group to put roots down. And so online was kind of my only option back then, to find people to connect with because I was just like going crazy at home by myself. And I started like a mom blog when I was a new mom, and that like never went anywhere, which looking back, I'm like, of course, I was like a brand new mom. I don't have any advice to give to anyone. But what came out of that was I have always had a love for writing. And this was like when blogging was a new thing. So I loved writing and sharing online and like write like essays or reflections. And then every once in a while, I'd sneak in like a Lord of the Rings essay on my mom blog. And of course, like no one read it. They were like, what is this? That's not what I'm here for. And I don't even know why it took me so long, but it finally clicked that I was like, wait, why don't I start a Tolkien blog? Like, of course. So finally, it was like February 2017, I had two kids and I just went on Twitter and I was like, let's just see if the username Tea with Tolkien is open. And it was. So I grabbed it. And then I bought the domain, got the Instagram. I just was like, yes, this is it. So then after that, it really started as like a very small book club. We were kind of just on Facebook, like there were not very many of us, but we just kept going and kept growing and reaching out to more people. More people kept finding us, and we're just like reading together and journeying together. So that's kind of how it got started, just kind of as a need for community, I guess.
I love that. I mean, I feel like that comes out in your writing, and then even just your online presence. And of course, if people didn't feel like there was a community there, it wouldn't be as big as it is, you know. So I think that it truly reflects in who you are and in the work that you put out and do. And of course, Tea with Tolkien is just, you know, a fantastic name. I feel like you put Tea with Tolkien and you're like snagged, like just an
Yes,
awesome name.
I know. I was like, yes. Um, so yeah, as who doesn't like tea? Like everyone likes tea. Everyone likes Tolkien. There you go.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. I'm drinking some tea right now. So there you
Nice.
go. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, your work, you know, the tea, the whole aesthetic has just been so cool. The community that I've kind of witnessed online as a sort of kind of, we've talked about just kind of our, we've been in the same sort of orbit of each other, and this is sort of our first like real interaction. But um, you know, we're talking here specifically about your new book that's coming out, Into the Heart of Middle Earth, which is just it's so awesome for you, and I read it and loved every page. And I'm not just saying that to you because I'm interviewing you, but I really did. I like very felt I don't know, I just felt very connected as a person who's a Christian myself and longs for good Tolkien spiritual stuff. Um, so there's the little bit of praise for the book there for people to go
That's
and
so
find
nice. Yeah.
it. um, so yeah, so I guess as I like before I got into the whole meat of it, like in the introduction, you talk a little about your Tolkien journey, which we sort of talked about here, and how it led you to create with Tea with Tolkien, and then you also talked about your conversion to Catholicism. And so I know that like many, including me, have considered Tolkien a huge spiritual influence. Like, could you tell us more about how Tolkien influenced your spiritual journey?
Absolutely. Yeah. The way I describe it is like I grew up with Tolkien and I saw him as a guy who really gets it. Like he seemed to really understand the way the world worked. And that comes through in his writing, especially in The Lord of the Rings, the way he balances good and evil, and you have um, choice and fate, and um, the allure of power, all of these different themes, fellowship. I just felt like Tolkien was almost like a mentor to me growing up. And growing up, I didn't know a single Catholic in like the whole world. Um, and I learned one day that Tolkien was Catholic. And that really caused me to pause, to be like, wait, this is a guy I really look up to. Maybe there's something there. And so I wouldn't say he's like the reason that I became Catholic, but he was definitely like, it was like a spark or something maybe that made me think, maybe I could at least look into this. And so I started looking into Catholicism with the mindset of like, almost like if I study this, I'll figure out what I disagree with and then it'll go away. Like there's like this pull in my heart towards this. And so let me just debunk it and then I can just move on with my life. But then the more I studied it, I ended up being like, wait, I actually like this quite a lot. So um, yeah, I would just say like he his life, his letters, and just the whole like philosophy that is underlying Middle Earth. We know it's, of course, not an allegory. I have to make that disclaimer. I just feel like this guy gets it. And let me see what he was on about, kind of. And that's kind of the beginning of the journey.
That's so awesome. I think we come from similar like religious backgrounds too. I think because you came from an evangelical background, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, me
Hmm.
too. And I had cousins who were Catholic, and so I knew some Catholics, but I remember there was a lady at our church who said we told my mom like, don't take your kids to see Lord of the Rings because they're satanic. And I
Yeah.
remember my mom was like, we're not listening to it because so and so said it was from the devil or whatever. And I like Googled it real quick, and I was like, Mom, he's a Christian. Look at here. And she was like, oh,
Yeah.
he is, right? And then
Gotcha.
right,
Yeah.
which I didn't know that he converted C.S. Lewis, which I feel like would have furthered, you know, my case to watch the movies. But you know, I
Yeah.
just wanted to see something cool and actiony. But man, I tell people this too. Like when I was in college, like I feel like a lot of people go through like a sort of spiritual crisis, especially around like that weird turn of adulthood. And Tolkien was there for me in that moment where I read him and something just sort of clicked me back into place where, like you said, I couldn't really articulate it at the time, but like this thing of like, oh, this dude gets it. Even in light of the darkness, there's still that hope, right? That what Aragorn, the Estelle or whatever, And there was even a journey in my own life where I kept encountering awesome Catholic writers. Like Father James Martin is a big guy that I like, Thomas Merton. And so that whole realm of like, and all three of them are also storytellers in a way, if people are familiar with Father James Martin now and Thomas Merton. But, I think that a lot of times too, that people, like you were talking about, like when you say, hey, I wrote something about a spiritual aspect of Tolkien, you have to put the disclaimer that I'm not making an allegory, right? I feel like
Yeah.
people feel very uncomfortable with doing that, but I feel like it's so, that experience is just so pervasive. Like, I don't know, have you felt that way too with talking to people?
Oh yeah, yeah. There's definitely been like um anytime because I'm like trying to figure out how to market my book. And so anytime I do kind of like start talking about the book, it always does come up. People are like, "Wait, I thought it was an allegory," or "Wait, I thought Tolkien was for everyone." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's not an allegory and Tolkien is for everyone." Um and I talk about that in the book, but obviously they haven't read the book and that's not their fault. So my job is to explain that to them. It's like you always have to make this big disclaimer. I don't want to ever make anyone feel unwelcome in my community if they aren't Catholic. Like regardless of your beliefs, like the Tolkien community is for everyone. But I feel like when you do, if you want to look into the beliefs that Tolkien himself held, it kind of like unlocks a deeper meaning in the Lord of the Rings, I would say, because you can suddenly start to see the way that his faith is like a current, like going under everything, or it's like a foundation. It's woven into the fabric of Middle Earth, and so it's like it's not necessary. There are like millions of people who love Tolkien and have no idea, that don't even care that he's religious, and like they have a perfectly valid experience with him, and it can be really profound. But the way that I want to approach Tolkien is in this way, I guess I would say. So I try to do it in a very like careful way that's balancing things, because you do every once in a while you get a book that's like Tolkien is Catholic and he's only for Catholics and he would hate you if you're not Catholic. And I'm like, oh my gosh, stop. Like, it stresses me out. So, yeah.
Well, you can be happy, listeners, because Kaitlyn is not going to be walking around with her Catholic army boots, ready
Yeah.
to get
Oh
you
my
to
gosh.
goose step to to the Lord of the Ring.
Well, and
Uh,
because I feel like Tolkien, and he says in the is it the foreword or like the introduction to the Lord of the Rings, he says he doesn't like allegory, but he likes applicability, because applicability leaves room for the freedom of the reader, whereas allegory just tries to like dominate and force an opinion or perspective on you. And so that's kind of the approach that I always try to take. It's like I try to go back to like what would Tolkien do in the situation. He wants applicability, not allegory. So that's my goal at all times.
yeah, WWJRTD.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I think that's one of the things I think you do really well. Like when I read the book, there were two things in particular that I thought you did really well. Like one, you do a fantastic job of bringing your spiritual and textual insights into the book without imposing them on the reader, which I think is really hard to do, and I think you do it just very well in your book. And two, you give a lot of information about Tolkien and Middle Earth without being overwhelming, which I also think is really hard to do. So I found that like the synthesis between these two that you use to parse out like a spiritual path that's both yours and rooted in Middle Earth, and then even like I think open for readers to develop their own. Like, did I hit the mark on what you were partially trying to do? And then, like, you already told us a little bit about what you had in mind, but like, what else did you have in mind spiritually when writing?
That's like hearing you say that is like the biggest relief to hear because that's been my biggest fear in this entire writing process is that I was going to come across as, you know, too far in one way or another. So balancing throughout this whole process has been like a huge goal for me. And I would say, especially when it comes to lore, and all of the like Tolkien information, my editor has been a huge help with that because he's a very casual Lord of the Rings fan. And so in editing, he'd be like, wait. What are you talking about here? And so that was like a great sign for me to be like, okay, I need to boil this down. Or there was a lot of lore dumps that I had to cut out, which to me was like, no, it was like a knife to my heart. But I was like, okay, I need normal people to be able to read this book, not just me. So I have a document that's like everything that we cut out of the book, and it's like 40,000 words long. Uh,
Yo.
so maybe that'll be like a second book someday. But yeah, I have just been trying so hard to think of the reader in mind while I've been writing this. And my ideal reader is like someone who might be, I would say you just need to like be the type of person that isn't like revulsed by Catholicism, and then we're good. Like I think if we can all just be like on friendly terms, then everything should be solid. Um, yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that because I know for me, like I've looked for sort of spiritual resources for Lord of the Rings, and just even relating it to Tolkien in my own life, and I think that this does it really well. Where I wasn't just reading it to analyze it, but there were especially towards the end, like there was just really some chapters that really impacted me, and I was like, man, this is just so good. Especially as somebody who is like a Christian and can see, kind of infer some of the ways that you're going and navigating Middle Earth, but then also, like, obviously, you're not doing the lore dumps, but you're definitely using Lord of the Rings and maybe even some more deeper aspects of the lore as almost like stepping stones or like lenses into like the possible spiritual applications. So, I mean, I absolutely love that. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
I do think that like when you mentioned lenses, I almost feel like I see the world through like a Middle Earth lens. And I think a big thing about literature in general is that it can be transformative. And it's almost like, what's the point of reading The Lord of the Rings if you aren't going to let it change your heart or change the way that you live or the way that you look at things? Like, what's the point in memorizing a bunch of Tolkien Gateway articles if you're not going to do anything with it? And so, like, my mission here is I truly think if more people read The Lord of the Rings and kind of applied these lessons to their life, like, we could have world peace. Like, we could have an amazing world. So, I just want like more people to read The Lord of the Rings and just to approach it in a mindset. Obviously, first and foremost, it's just a story. It's a great story, but it's a story that can change your heart and it can transform your life if you want it to, and if you let it to, and if you let it. Um, and that's my job as the writer. I feel like I'm almost like I'm here to hold your hand and like guide you through this journey, um, to hopefully see ways that you can apply these the like themes and lessons to your practical life.
Mm, well said. And I will say that I think that you are an excellent guide. So, um,
Yes.
as a Christian myself, like I feel it's easy to raise my eyebrows to another spiritual take on Tolkien, right? We've talked about all the good things that's available and even the good things that you've done, but I think there's also a lot of really bad takes out there. But like I said, but your approach to giving your insights into Middle Earth and how we can take inspiration from Tolkien's own spirituality that comes through the legendarium is done without being preachy or cheesy, in my opinion. So I guess for you, how are you able to navigate the realm of spiritual Tolkien books that maybe you've read to sort of see where people were going, to write one that was both unique and, I would argue applicable?
I have had a hard time finding many of those books. I and I don't want to like put anyone on blast, but
Sure.
there are books that I read when I first got really into Tolkien, and I thought oh man, these are incredible books. Like, such good analysis. And then 10 years later, I go back to read the books and I was like, not so great. Whether they're completely missing the point in a certain character, or kind of trying to take something that isn't there and use it to become some kind of like culture war like point. I just feel like, yeah, that's been hard. It's hard to find good resources in that area. Um, I don't know if there are that many. I'm trying to
Well,
think of some off the top of my head, but yeah, it's it's definitely like a sphere where you have to tread lightly. Um, and I think a lot of it is finding people that you connect with and maybe that you can trust, and journeying together.
I like that more because even though you can read books, like, and you can sort of develop a relationship, there's almost like a one-sided type of thing when you're reading text, and kind of similar with me. And I won't put people down either, but there was stuff that I read 10 years ago, and like you said, you're just like, man, this is amazing. And then and I even have incorporated some stuff into my own writing, and then I look back at my writing and I cringe a little bit. I'm like,
Hmm.
ooh, just not my favorite.
Yeah, and that's just part of life and it's part of growth. So we're all cringe at some point. I'm sure in 10 years I'll cringe at whatever I'm doing now.
Yeah, I think that for me, yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, not for you specifically, but like in general. But what's never cringe is ripped black skinny jeans and only chasing safety by under oath. So, eternal.
As a classic, yeah. Never goes out of style.
Never goes out of style. But yeah, I guess for you, like when you were taught, like, so with kind of the lack of resources, and then you kind of focused on relationships for the most part, it sounds like, in kind of formulating, I don't know if you would call them arguments, but more of just like explications, I guess, for you. And I guess there's some arguments that you make in there, but I guess for that, like, where did you see relationships? Like, could you unpack a little bit more what you mean by like the relational aspect of you parsing out those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to approach Tolkien is from is within like talking to other people about Tolkien. And like we mentioned earlier, like going to these in-person Tolkien events is a huge thing, I think. And when you're not able to attend in-person events, it's like even interacting on social media, um, finding like online communities. I feel like that has been very illuminating for me because while I have a lot of information, a lot of knowledge about one aspect of Tolkien. You have something in a totally different area. Someone else over here knows about this. So like I know a lot about like Tolkien's Catholicism, but I don't know a lot about his love of Norse mythology, for example. So like I bring one thing to the table, someone else brings another thing to the table, and it's in these conversations that I think all of us grow in our knowledge, not only in our knowledge of Tolkien, but of each other, of ourselves, of our world. And it's through these communities and these conversations that I think um, we can all be transformed in a way. And it really enriches like every aspect of your life, whether it's your understanding of Tolkien or just the way you go about your day.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that. Each each person is a sort of member of the fellowship where,
Hmm.
obviously Legolas isn't going to be a Pippin and Pippin isn't going to be a Boromir, but you got to have everyone together to, get
Yeah.
the ring to Barad-dûr. So, or
Yeah,
Barad-dûr
definitely.
rather. um so I guess, getting more into the book here, like one of the things that you do is that you begin each chapter with a quote from the Legendarium, And then you thread the themes from each of these quotes into the aim of each of their respective chapters. And then at the end of the chapter, you give some questions for self reflection, and even you have some call to action pieces as well in some chapters. So, why did you see these elements as important when writing Into the Heart of Middle Earth?
So I would say at first, the first part of it is that I always want the journey to be grounded in Tolkien. So with each quote that I chose for the beginning of the chapter, you're basically following the hobbits on their journey. So it starts with a little bit more about Bilbo, and then the rest of the book kind of moves into Frodo's journey. And you're basically like walking with him to Mount Doom. And so you go through so many different aspects. At the beginning of the book, you're learning how to establish a shire in your own life, and you're kind of fortifying your own heart. And then once you've done that, you've kind of laid your foundation. That's when you start really like going into the journey of following Frodo to Mount Doom. So then you're learning about fellowship, learning how to choose your friends, learning the value of friendship, and then you're going to start experiencing suffering as Frodo does. You're going to need to learn about hope and discernment and temptation and all of that up until you get to sections about grief, and then at the end is the consolation. That's the eucatastrophe. So it kind of follows the arc of Frodo's journey, so that it's like you're walking alongside him as you're learning about Middle Earth. You're learning about yourself.
Man, I kind of got like this. I picked up on sort of like the chronological linear type of thing, but I had not picked up on like sort of the meta frame that you had of like it's Bilbo and Frodo's journey. So I absolutely love that. I mean, and I feel like there's definitely, because I know in your other publications and blog in your communities, you do talk about like how to be a hobbit at heart, which is sort of like developing this ethics of being like ethic of hobbitness or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like why do you find that like important to identify specifically with Bilbo and Frodo and being a hobbit?
Well, I feel like in a lot of ways it's the most approachable way to get into the Lord of the Rings for a lot of people. Like they're the protagonists of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So they are something that most people know about. And it's kind of not intimidating at all. If I was like, let's be a high Noldrin elf at heart, people would be like, whoa, 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 that sounds hard. But everyone knows what a hobbit is. And everyone wants to be a hobbit. Like, yeah, you're like, yeah, I want to sit around and eating mushrooms. Like, that sounds great. But my approach is that, yeah, eating mushrooms is great. But that's not really what this story is about, because these hobbits have to sacrifice. They have to let go of what they love in order to save it. They have to carry each other. They have to really go through some stuff. And it's in doing so and taking these small daily steps towards this like massive, intimidating goal. That's how the world is saved. And so you can't just sit around eating mushrooms. Like, as great as that sounds, being a hobbit at heart is about letting those things go when you need to. And Tolkien talks about how hobbits are soft as butter, but they're actually like under their surface, they are tougher than you would think. And so, like, that can be us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That is true. There's like the relatability of hobbits, where, like you said, there's very few of us who feel Aragorn like, right? But when you see Bilbo in the in Goblin Town, and he's fallen and he is thinking about bacon and being in his
Yeah.
comfortable chair, you're like, oh yeah, that's what I get. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, Bilbo's in the Battle of Five Armies. What does he do? He gets knocked out and he misses the battle. Like, I can relate to that. I'm not like this heroic elf person with a sword. Like, I'm just a girl. Like, so I think that they serve as a really good everyman type of character. And Tolkien himself describes himself as being like a hobbit too. So that's another way that you can kind of work this into the journey of exploring both Tolkien's life and his beloved hobbits.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely love that. Yeah, not only are hobbits a bridge into the heart of Middle Earth, but also the heart of Tolkien himself.
Hmm.
Yeah, so good. So good. Yeah, so I guess you had kind of hinted at it there as we were talking about it, but like towards the end of the book, you really start to unpack some of the more deeper themes, I would say, within in Lord of the Rings, but I guess it's in the Legendary, but more specifically Lord of the Rings, like pity and grief and eucatastrophe in ways that really highlight their importance in understanding Tolkien and his work, and identifying them as not just like these things can be very negative, but you talk about how they're positive concepts that we can incorporate into our own lives. Like, so why did you decide to conclude the book with these concepts?
I feel like with anything, you have to like start out with the happy stuff. Um, because if imagine if I would have started the first chapter with like suffering, people would have been like, whoa, 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 I'm not ready for that. And you're not, because it's the same with the Lord of the Rings. You're introduced to the Shire. You get to spend a lot of time in the Shire getting to know what it's like. You get to, put your feet up, make yourself at home. And then it's only after then when you've really gotten to know the Shire and gotten to love it, that you can see Frodo having to let go of it. And you really feel that pain that he feels too, because you're going together with Frodo into this wild world that is full of dangerous things. So it's like you start the journey kind of with introspection. You're looking at your own life and what are your values, and how do you want to craft a life that supports those values. And once you've started kind of going through it, you've got your fellowship, you're discerning your goals, you're discerning your purpose, and then you kind of can, I think, dive deeper into these things that are a little less happy, like grief and the idea of pity, because it really is like an anchor to the whole story. And then at the end, we don't want to end on a sad note. So that's when we get to talk about eucatastrophe. And that's the unexpected happy ending that brings tears to your eyes, and it's like pierces your heart, with joy and sorrow all mixed together. So that's really like the height of the story for Tolkien.
Yeah. And like you said, you can't have, I mean, it's literally the happy ending, right? So you can't have an ending without the beginning and middle. And
Hmm.
so that it makes sense. And especially too, like just thinking about, even because Tolkien specifically connected the eucatastrophe to the resurrection of Christ. And so even like Tolkien, or sorry, Tolkien, Freudian slip there. But Jesus's own, story as in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it starts off with the celebration of his birth, right? It's like really happy, even amidst very dangerous circumstances. And then there's this kind of mix of friendship and danger and feats of miracles, and then of course the sadness of the crucifixion, and then the eucatastrophe of the resurrection. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that really is like the pattern of a good story. And Tolkien knows this. And so he kind of mirrors it after that. Like you have your intro, everything's all right, something bad happens, story, 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 sad thing, and then happy ending.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, people, if you're like, what's a eucatastrophe? What do I want to do with all this pity and grief without getting super, super nerdy? While also exercising your spiritual muscles. I mean, Kaitlyn's got the resource for you. So you got to go get into the heart of Middle Earth so that you can learn more about eucatastrophe. It's the best. It's the best. And then
Yeah,
go read on fairy stories and then get super nerdy.
absolutely. Yeah, definitely. On Fairy Stories is like Chef's Kiss. It's a good one.
Yeah, every time like when I hear people talk about like what's their, I think of the Prancing Pony, but like they always interview people and they're like, "What's your favorite work outside of the Legendarium?" And mine's on fairy stories every time. Yeah.
I also feel like Mythopoeia is really cool too.
Oh yeah.
There's that section where and I talk about this in the book a little bit. He talks about how man is like the refracted light, and I don't
Mm.
remember the whole quote, but it's like the idea that God is like the source of light, and then we're all kind of refracted through that, and it makes like a rainbow of colors, and so like all of humanity is all these different hues, and together we make like this beautiful rainbow. Like I just love that.
Yeah, and you can't have you can't have on fairy stories without mythopoeia.
Yeah.
Mythopoeia comes first, so it's
Yeah.
so good.
They're like buddies. Yeah.
Yeah, the word buddies for those just makes me think of them like little guys holding
Yeah.
hands
They're just
because
little guys. Yeah.
man, this has been awesome, Kaitlyn. But before like we sign off here and you let people know where they can find you and when and where they can get the book, like is there any topics or conversations that you'd like to talk about that we might have missed or passed along? And then of course, yeah, we'll start with that first and then we'll talk about.
Sure. I feel like we talked about quite a lot. I can't think of anything in particular that we missed. I just feel like the key takeaway, like the book, is really meant to be something that can guide you through the Lord of the Rings. And I say in the book, like, I'm not here to dictate your path. Like, I don't want to choose your path for you, but whatever your path is, I want to like help you along it. And so the beginning of the book is really about like, what do you hold dear? And what do you want your life to look like? What values do you hold dear? And how do we craft a life that supports that? And then how do we look at Tolkien and draw inspiration and strength and encouragement from these stories in order to pull back and look at your own life and enrich it. So that's kind of like the whole goal, but I feel like it's a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's awesome. So, I mean, I feel like you just encapsulated so much goodness in that kind of summary that you put there. So, thanks for
Oh,
that.
good, good. I
I'm
never know like if I'm doing a good job or not. So it's great to hear.
yeah, I'm sold. Immediately sold. So,
Yes.
so yeah, I guess so. When will the book be released? Where can they get it? Maybe are there any other future projects or things they can look forward to? And where can people find you on the internet?
Sure. So, the way that you can find me is I'm at Tea with Tolkien pretty much anywhere. And my website is teawithtolkien.com. And all of the information about the book, I have all of the links. Like it's available on Amazon. My publisher is called Ave Maria Press, so it's available on their site. It's on Blackwell's. It's like bookshop.org. There's like a bunch of places. And so all of those links are at teawithtolkien.com/book. So I tried to simplify it for everyone. In terms of what's coming up next, we're going to do a book club about my book coming up soon. And I think that's going to start in March or April. And then after that, in May, we're going to do a big, long Lord of the Rings book club. So I'm looking forward to that because we're doing the Silmarillion right now. But because my book comes out in the timing, we've had to do basically like a speed run of the Silmarillion. So that it's been very intense. So I'm kind of excited for like a slower journey through the Lord of the Rings coming up soon.
Yeah, that'll be fantastic. I love that. Well, Kaitlyn, everyone look for the book. Go find it. I'll have links to where you can find it too in the show notes. Also, if you're like, man, Kaitlyn sounds awesome, Tea with Tolkien sounds awesome, there'll be links there. And maybe, you want to join the book club. Maybe you want to go on a long journey into Kaitlyn's book and The Lord of the Rings later. So,
Yeah.
which, sounds like it's going to be a good time. But thanks again, Kaitlyn. This has been really fun.
Thank you. I'm so glad to hear that you liked the book because, like, I'm so nervous about people to read it. And so hearing that people are enjoying it is great.
Yeah, I think people will love it. So, and if you don't love it, people, you're going to have to answer to me, the authority on all things.
That's right. If you don't like it, please don't tell me. I don't want to know.
If you tell her, we'll come find you or something. I don't know. We'll give you the one ring, and then the rates will come get you.